Hello! In this lesson, we will finally create our first CPT. So continuing from where we left off, to register the post type itself, I need a WordPress function called register post type. And of course, I'm gonna work with it here inside my method. So I call it here. I left it for this lecture because we will need a whole video just to talk about it. But that will only happen this time, okay? The next time we register a CPT in this course, it won't take so long because I won't explain everything again. First, this function accepts two parameters. The first is the key for our CPT. This key can be no longer than 20 characters and can contain only lowercase alphanumeric characters, hyphens, or underscores. In my case, the key for the CPT will be mv-slider. The second parameter is an array with a lot of arguments. I will try to explain the main ones to you here. The first argument I will use here is called label, which is the name of our CPT. Here you can have spaces, special characters, okay? In our case, it is just slider. The next one is description. I can put whatever I want in here too. I'll just go with sliders. The next one is labels. This is basically an array of strings that is going to be used for various tasks involving your post type in the WordPress admin. For example, the text that's available in the CPT menu when you add a new post. There are many options and none of them are required. If I leave this array empty, my post type will inherit the same labels used in regular WordPress posts or pages. If you want to see a complete list of these labels, I'll leave you with the WordPress documentation page that has all of them, okay? I'm going to work with just two of these labels. The first one is name. This will be sliders. And this is generally in the plural form, okay? And the other one is singular name, which is the CPT name in the singular, slider. Now from this point on, we've got some more complicated arguments. But so that you can see something in the admin, I will pass the first one here and instantiate the class in the main class constructor as explained in the previous video. The first in this list of more complex arguments that we're going to pass here is called public. This tells you whether your CPT will be available for public access on the back end as well as on the front end. By default, the value of this argument here is false. There are times when this is useful because you don't really want anyone to have access to it. For example, WordPress post revisions are not public. You don't have a specific menu in WordPress to see the revisions. In our case, the CPT will be public, so the value is true. But this still won't guarantee that your CPT will be displayed in admin, okay? The reason is that this class here hasn't been instantiated yet. We just have an abstract idea of the class for now. To bring it to life, we need a real object. We could do that here at the end of the file, but we'll do it there in the constructor of the plugin's main class to make it more organized. Well, but first I have to fix a little mistake I made here. This is not like this. And done. Now it's correct. So let's save it here. I'm going to come back here to the main class of the plugin. First, let's require the class file where the CPT has been registered using a require once here in the constructor. We can use that constant specially created for calling our PHP files. This one here. and we concatenate here with the file path. And now down here, I can instantiate the class. This will help us call the constructor method of this class, which in turn, let's go back in the file. It will register the CPT using the init hook. Now, if we check the admin, oops, I think the file name is wrong. Let's go back and fix that. Of course, the folder name is missing. And it won't work like this, Marcelo. Now it is. Now we have our CPT created. Cool, right? It is already working quite well. But let's add some more support here to make it even better. By the way, the next argument I can use here is called supports. So let's set this argument to. This is about the resources that are going to be available in the edit area of your CPT. By default, if you don't pass anything here, your editing area will show at least both the title and the editor area. Let me create a new slider for you to have an idea. Well, first of all, look how cool this is. We are not creating another post nor a page. We are creating a different kind of post called slider. This will be used to create each item of the slideshow. That's the idea. Well, you see, I have at least two items here, the title area and the editor. But we also need a place to add a background image to the slider. And we can achieve this with the featured image field. So back to the code. Here under supports, I can open an array and enter everything I want, for example, title, editor, and thumbnail, which is that area to upload an image. Save in here. Now back to the slider. I have here a place to upload an image. One detail is that this option will only appear here if the theme also supports post thumbnails. If that's not the case, no deal. It will not display here. You can add other items. So please take a look at the WordPress docs to know what else can be used, okay? I'll leave the link there also in the extra material. Let's go to the next one. The next one is hierarchical. Its default value is false. When you set it to true, you create a parent and a child post relationship. This is a WordPress behavior that allows you to nest a page on top of each other. But this will only work if you pass the page attributes value here under supports. Let me give you an example. I'm going to add page attributes under support. And here it should be true. Let's go to the admin. Let me create two sliders just for the sake of testing here. You guys are already seeing something different here, but let me go back to the list of slides. If I quick edit the posts, I can choose one of the items here to be the parent. Actually, I can put it in reverse order, so it's even better for you to see it. So the parent will be this one. Do you see it? This means a parent-child relationship exists. Well, that was just an example. I'm gonna undo this. My post type is not going to be hierarchical, okay? So here, I'm going to set it to false. Next one is going to be show UI. This argument is related to the public argument. It is usually true and follows the value given in public. If it is true, it will show the post's user interface, the post's UI, that is the edit area, the post list table, etc. If it's false, you'll not even be able to fill in the post fields. Again, you can ask me, what is this for? Well, it is the same case with the post revisions. They are not public and don't have a proper user interface, a UI, so it does serve a purpose. Next is show in menu. Here you decide if you want to show a custom post type related menu item or not in the WordPress admin. This will depend on the value you pass here in show UI. If it is set to false, the menu item will not show up either. That's because the menu item is part of the user interface, right? And here is an interesting thing. Later I'll come back here and set it to false. For now it will be true. You'll see later that I will create a different menu for our plugin, so the CPT menu will not be visible. Later you understand, okay? The next one is menu position. Here you can specify in which position the menu item will appear. You can use the values that are showing up on your screen. In the case of our custom post type, I will give the value 5, which corresponds to a position below the post menu item. But as we will hide the menu later, it makes no difference here. Okay, let's go to the next one. Show in admin bar. The admin bar is that little black bar at the top of WordPress. Let me show you. This guy over here. The value is actually set together with the value of this previous argument, show in menu. If it is set to false, then nothing will show up in the bar that refers to our custom post type. In turn, you remember that show in menu is related to this other one, show UI. When you look at it carefully, it makes a lot of sense. I can set this to true. And we'll see the slider item there in the admin bar when we hover the mouse over the new item. You'll also see this same option right there in the front end. Wanna see it? Look at it here. And if I check the front end, I also have it here. Let's go to the next one. Show in nav menus. This one is quite interesting. It defines if the items you create for your CPT will be available or not to add to a WordPress menu. I'll show you. I'm gonna set this here to true. And when I hover over the appearance menu, menus item. By the way, if it's not showing up here, you can click on screen options and then select this, okay? And look here, the items we've just created. With this, I can add these items here to the menus as if they were common pages or posts. Let's go one more. Can export. This will define if this post type, in this case, the sliders we're going to create, can be exported by the WordPress export tool. In case you've never heard of that tool, I'll show you. Let's go over here under Tools, Export. And this one is the WordPress exporter. And look at this, sliders. This is very interesting because it allows you to import all the data from your WordPress post types into another site. A lot of people use this to avoid having to recreate everything from scratch when they create a whole new site and want to reuse content from an old site. And there is an import tool that can also restore the post content. This is a very nice feature to have in a plugin. Back to the editor. By default, I forgot to mention, the value here is true. That's why that option was there for us. The next one here is has archive. This one is of extreme importance. If this is set to false, you won't be able to create pages with a list of items in your CPT. WordPress calls those lists archive templates. In this plugin specifically, we will not need archive templates, okay? That's because it will act only as a slideshow, so I don't need a special page that has a list of slides. This will make more sense in the other plugins we're going to create later in this course. But I will set it to true here for now, just so you can see one thing. If you go back here to the menu, now if I go over here to sliders, I click here on the View All tab, I can add a sort of general CPT archive page. Check it out. This will help you view all the posted items at once, just like a blog page. Well, that's what an archive page is all about. We will use all that later on in the course. Very interesting, huh? But for now, I will set my argument value to false. The next one is exclude from search. By default, this comes as false. What will happen is that when someone performs a search on your site, they will see your CPT among the search results as well. In this plugin, that is not relevant, so I will set it to false. You're not going to have an archive page, right? So it doesn't matter to us. The next one is publicly queryable. Well, this says whether queries can be performed on the front end using your post type or not. In the case of this plugin, it makes no difference if the value is true or false. But if your plugin has archive pages, for example, if you need to open each post individually in the front end for viewing, it is good to set this to true. Next one is show in REST. Well, I won't have time to explain what the REST API is right now. Maybe this subject can be covered later in a future version of this course, but just so you know, there is a very powerful API in WordPress called REST. It is basically used to get information from posts and other objects in JSON format. It is very useful, for example, for you to pull data from one WordPress site into a second site, or even into a non-WordPress site because of the JSON data format, which is universal. But it also happens to be used internally within WordPress itself. It also happens that the blog editor is all built using the REST API. So if you want your CPT to be displayed within the blog editor interface, you have to pass this argument here as true. By doing so, let's check it out in the admin. There you go. Now my CPT is already displaying in the blog editor and I'm no longer using the classic editor. Cool, huh? The appearance has changed. So let's go back to the editor. And the last argument I will pass here is called menu icon. This refers to the icon that appears next to the plugin name in the admin menu. The easiest way to add an icon is to set the dash icons library, which is already natively supported by WordPress. You can see a list of these icons by visiting this page here. Here you will choose an icon, click on it, and then copy this information here. There are other ways to add icons. For example, you might want to add your own icon. And I will leave the link to the documentation that has some examples of use, okay? But for time reasons, I won't go into details here in the course. That's enough for now. There are other arguments that you can use to register your CPT, but they are not so widely used. Generally, the ones we have gone over here will do the trick. Well, folks, that's it. So we have created our first CPT, our custom post type. It is all set up here in the backend and ready to be used. Just to finish off, what you can do is add one more line here into the activation function of the plugin. Let's go over there and say the following. Unregister post type MV-slider. This will do the opposite of what we have done so far. That is, when I deactivate the plugin, my CPT, whose key is this one, will be unregistered, okay? So that's it. If I want now, I can add some slides and then work with them. Next lesson, I will show you what I did to test it, and we'll start a new subject. See you then.